Hey guys, Crypto Sunday and missed last week. So in the last 2 weeks, portfolio is up 2%. So not exactly a huge amount going on. Kind of hoped we were going to get a sort of end of year Santa rally. Bitcoin and sort of most of the other cryptos certainly aren't following the stock market. Stocks sort of dropped off a small amount really in November and have sort of started to return practically at all-time highs. And yeah, crypto sort of not particularly happy, but yeah, not a huge amount of news this week. We sort of missed we got another chunky down week in the coin shares report for last week that I missed, and then this week was 1.07 billion of inflow, so not too bad. Mostly Bitcoin, but quite a bit of Ethereum actually there, and a hell of a lot of XRP. Yeah, 289 million of XRP. That is very substantial. We've had some new ETFs launch in this period, I think, and sort of go live, and they're very, very popular, nearly as much as Ethereum. So that's pretty strong. 26 million into the multi-asset as well. It's all been struggling. Solana struggling a little bit, which we'll come to. And yeah, some fairly small numbers elsewhere. Quite a large outflow for Cardano. They only had they're down to 85 million in assets under management, and they had 19 million outflow. So that's like 20% of assets under management, even if it is only a small number. And by country, quite big inflow into Canada and outflow from Germany. These are sort of a little bit all over the place at the moment. Looking at the recent week, noting the Solana ETFs, they're quite a bit strange, really. You're noticing the 21 shares one was sort of seeded with 111 million initially, and with the sort of recent week and previous couple of days, it's nearly all come out. So yeah, 101 million net outflow total. That doesn't include the seeded amount. So basically, it has nearly all gone, all bar sort of 10 million. So that's a little bit strange, considering sort of the Bitwise one was seeded with 222 million, 223 million, and they haven't had a single outflow day. Similarly with Fidelity, they didn't get a lot of seeded, so there wouldn't be a lot to come out, I suppose. But these inflows that have sort of been recently put in haven't seen an outflow at all. And similarly with Grayscale, had about the same amount seeded as 21 shares, and again, haven't seen a single outflow date. So something going on at 21 shares. On the Ethereum side, it's sort of been relatively quiet. We sort of had four red days, 79 million, fairly small one, 41 and 75, sandwiching a 140 million inflow. So net for the week is down, but not a huge amount really, considering the numbers that they were putting up before. And quite similar on the Bitcoin side, we had 3 out of the 5 days positive, but a 194 million outflow on Thursday, sort of coming from BlackRock and Fidelity mostly. So yeah, it's a net red, but not exactly huge for the week. So just a little bit of uncertainty, I suppose, in the ETFs. They're not exactly mass selling, but they're not sort of providing any upside at the moment. The big news on the Treasury company side was not MicroStrategy acquiring 130 Bitcoin to make it a round 650,000, but announcing that they were sort of issuing a load of shares, basically, of MicroStrategy MSTR shares, and holding the cash to pay for the dividends, it looks like. So $1.44 billion diluted and is not going to be used to buy Bitcoin, which is sort of the first time this has really happened, I believe. And yeah, I'd sort of been saying for a while that these dividends were a bit of a sort of bearish headwind, potentially for, I can't imagine they would, be forced to sell too much Bitcoin to pay for the dividends. But if they weren't going to sort of do anything other than sort of be issuing new debt or strange leveraged vehicles to pay for it, then it starts to get a bit risky. But this sort of thing but gives them, I think, 2 years worth of dividend payments at the sort of the only negative coming to MSTR shareholders, really. Obviously, the perma bull type strategy, perma bull, Michael Saylor fans are super happy about this, and they're saying, there you go, the dividends are fine now. And I sort of think, well, all of the benefit from the preferred shares was years ago, or earlier in the year, and some last year, I believe, and now they're just a liability. A liability sort of sitting there that you now have to do things like this for, diluting your main, flagship share basically just to pay for those dividends, and that's not really something to get too happy about. And so that obviously with the price taking a little bit of a hit, the magazines and newspapers and things don't exactly keep up with absolute latest price. Strategy has sort of recovered a little bit. Bitcoin has recovered a little bit since then, but you start to get these headlines. Bitcoin has plunged. Not sure I would call it plunged. Strategy is an early victim. As if they are dead. Like they don't have to sell their Bitcoin. The stock price of MSTR may be a bit hurt, but I'm not sure I would call them the victim. I'm not going to sort of pay for The Economist, but it's just interesting to see the headline. They note they're the largest corporate owner of Bitcoin. Now, with the price of cryptocurrency plummeting, not sure I would call it plummeting. It's fairly normal as far as previous drops go. It is something else altogether. It's not the Bitcoin reactor, as they'd called it. An example of hubris, demonstrating the risks of taking on leverage to purchase enormous quantities of a volatile asset. I would say sort of the stock price has been hit, but they haven't really seen too much of the risk of that just yet. But favourite of the week, I suppose, has to go to Bloomberg, and surprised to see this. It looks like it's Merrin of the Merrin Talks Money podcast and newsletter from the looks of it, works for Bloomberg. I sort of listen to the podcast every now and then, and she's sort of a Bitcoin skeptic, maybe. I believe she owns some, and he sort of tends to prefer gold. She always asks the guests on the podcast at the end, if you had to hold Bitcoin or gold for the next 10 years, what would you hold? And sort of, she tends to interview people that would say gold anyway, and you sort of think, what's the point in asking the question? Some of the people say Bitcoin, and she's very shocked and, asks why. But yeah, it seems a little bit poorly done. Obviously, I can't read the article. It's sort of very, very protective on Bloomberg. This is for subscribers only. But yeah, that's Bloomberg. Yeah, the very idea that it's starting to look like digital tulip, I think is a little bit ridiculous. People just need to, actually look at what happened in the sort of tulip bubble. This was, for one, I believe, just in Amsterdam, in Holland, back in the 1600s. So it wasn't a global bubble. And the sort of second biggest thing I would say would be that it happened once. It sort of went up in basically in 1636, and it sort of stayed there for very, very little time. Had sort of one, potential recovery, and then that was it. And it sort of went down in 1637, and never to return, basically. So, or they sort of, went up, in line with inflation at what sort of tulips should have been priced at, as they always were before. Obviously, Bitcoin sort of went and basically did this in 2012, sort of came back down again, went up in 2013 to sort of new highs, came back down again in 2014, went up again in 2017 to new highs, down again, 2021 to new highs and went down again, and is now in the fifth bull market. So yeah, I would say it's a little bit ridiculous to call this tulip mania. Tulip mania happened once, and it was literally just in one country. A sort of little bit of a crazy situation. Whereas if the whole world, agrees on the Bitcoin price, as they appear to, and it's sort of, dropping in price by 85% doesn't lead people to sort of say, well, that's rubbish, let's just all get rid of it and move on. It recovers every time and, moves to new highs. I think people are sort of calling this like bull market over, bear market and everything. Sort of need to remember that the FTX bottom was 16,500 or something. We're still at $90,000. So yeah, I think the sort of crux of that is a lot of people didn't invest at the bottom or even close to the bottom. They were sort of investing at, $50, $60, $80,000 Bitcoin, and they were investing into altcoins because the idea is, in the bull market, altcoins outperform. And so a lot of them are down on what they invested in, sort of anywhere from 50%, 70% down. So they're calling it a bear market. But if you sort of think from 2022 bottom to now, we're still currently sort of 5.5x up from the bottom, then I would still call that a bull market, really. And then, rather shockingly, so you've got The Economist, Bloomberg, and CNBC, sort of three of the biggest financial hitters. You have a fairly measured article from the looks of it. Bitcoin is down nearly 30% of its record high. History shows that's normal. The price has fallen around 36% from its all-time high recently. But data shows this is a regular occurrence in the history. 2021 and 2017 cycles, there were a number of instances of drops of this size or bigger, which is absolutely true. Bitcoin's drawdowns of this size has been followed by rallies to new record highs, and sort of, goes on to flesh out the detail of those prices. It's often, referred to as cycles, and yeah, he's sort of basically saying, it's 35%, it happens, it looks, a big number, and it may be sort of happening in a different way, a bit slower, or, we haven't had the sort of V-shaped recovery that some people are thinking, but sort of every time is different, every cycle is going to be different, especially now we have ETFs and institutions and things all in there. But yeah, I thought that was sort of very surprising. It always depends on who's writing it. I suppose there may be people at Bloomberg that are super positive on Bitcoin, and it's just Merrin and similar. Well, The Economist, I think, is normally the butt of jokes for people. People say when the economists say something is going to die, then that's probably the bottom, and vice versa. But CNBC, I sort of don't know. I think this is generally not the best thing to be watching or reading, but yeah, this seems a fairly measured quality article, just reminding people that this is mostly normal. So just a quick look at the mining hash rate. Not a huge amount happening. We did have a bit of a low period. Sort of got back into the sort of mid 800s for a little while, and yeah, sort of hasn't been breaking to massive new highs. We sort of had a 1.3 zeta hash and yeah 1.28 again last or sort of late afternoon yesterday. But yeah, this is still, I believe, not quite enough to push difficulty up. We're on 10.23 minutes. Should be 10, of course. So yeah, after having two fairly minor drops to difficulty, we're on schedule for this coming Thursday. Another drop still of 2.28%, which is always good for miners. Obviously, remembering where we've come, these are, fairly small drops. If we drop to, about here, it's only taken us back a couple of months, and we've come sort of an enormous way up from the 130s back in early September. So, yeah, not great for the miners at current prices, but, these drops are always a help. And of course, global liquidity, a lot of people are saying sort of correlation is dead effectively. I sort of went through last video just zooming out a little bit. Yeah, it may have sort of short term broken down, but I think longer term this does sort of tend to play out. But we maybe shouldn't be sort of, expecting this to catch up, anytime soon. But sort of more over the long term. I just think, it pushing to pretty much new highs from the looks of it is always a good thing. We need some sort of cash to flow back into risky assets like Bitcoin, and we can potentially get there. But even if there was no correlation, you don't want to be sort of seeing this, or lower correlation. You don't want to be seeing this coming down because it doesn't bode particularly well. So yeah, this has been sort of bumbling along in the last few weeks, but has near enough ticked up to new highs. So for the week, not a huge move really. Bitcoin down 3%, Sol down 4.5%, Ethereum absolutely flat, Chainlink up 5%, interestingly. Helium down 10.5%, Radium up 0.6%, Metaplex down 13.4%, that's the underperformer, and Gito down 7.2%. Honey, interestingly, up 2.3%, although it's still pretty much dead. So, yeah, that's the portfolio for the week. Barely anything happened. We're sort of just staying patient, basically. So, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and like and subscribe. See you soon.